Without any further ado, let's talk about Regency jewels. When I'm asked to give one of my talks, it generally means a lot of research. And it is during this research that even with around 40 years' experience in the antique, estate and modern jewellery world, that I continue to learn more about jewels, as well as history and people and places, and so it goes on. And so I would like to start today by thanking Susanna for this opportunity in asking me to talk to all of you about Regency jewels. As you would surely know, the term and period Regency came about when it was decided that King George III was mad. He was unable to continue to carry out the duties and tasks expected of a monarch, which he had done since ascending the throne in 1760. So the government of the day appointed his eldest son George, heir apparent, to take over this role from 1811. Being the eldest son of the monarch, he assumed the title and role of Prince Regent, and so from this date until 1820, before he became George IV, the Regency period was born. Many things, including porcelain, such as this richly decorated porcelain dinner service, were made in the Regency period. This is a Regency credenza with rosewood and brass inlay. And this, a Regency bracket clock with brass arch. And all three of these pieces, or all of these pieces, are referenced as having a Regency style. While places too were referred to in this way. Regent Street, the now iconic London shopping street, and Regent's Park in London were both named after the Prince, even though the park itself had a history going back to the time of Henry VIII. Jewellery too was referred to as having been made or coming from the Regency period. And though in my opinion there is not a particular style which one would actually say, oh yes, sorry, that's Regency, as so many pieces of Georgian jewellery look similar, if it is known to have been made around 1811 to 1820, it is then referred to as Regency jewellery. Unlike, for example, the flowing and naturalistic designs of Art Nouveau, as we see here in this truly exceptional French pendant by René Levy, or the striking and structured lines and colours of Art Deco jewellery, as seen in this amazing jade, black onyx and diamond pendant by the French jeweller Georges Fouquet. Both of these styles are very apparent and very date-specific, and in many cases can be spotted as being from their respective periods a mile away. So though my talk is entitled Regency Jewels, it will also include jewels from the Georgian period, both from Great Britain, as well as a few pieces from Europe and the continent. Getting back to why we are all here today though, your heroine, Jane Austen, lived from 1775 to 1817. What I have learnt about Jane, and which I am sure many of you, if not all of you, would know, is that she is known to have possessed at least 3 pieces of jewellery that are still in existence and known to have been worn and owned by this illustrious author. The first and most famous is the cabochon blue turquoise ring, mounted in all yellow gold. From what I gather, not much is known as to how it came into Jane's possession, but after she owned it, it was passed down through the generations to female members of the family before being offered for auction by Sotheby's in 2012, together with various documents relating to its authenticity. It is amazing that such a simple design, a simple piece of cabochon turquoise, mounted in the simplest of gold settings on a simple gold band, could become such a famous jewel. But then this is what provenance and provable detail provenance can do to a piece, and in turn make it a valuable piece as well. I would suggest, if I was to sell such a piece with no provenance, but made in exactly the same way, from the same period, it would retail for between 1,200 and 1,500 Australian dollars. That's because I'm extremely good value. And yet, the history and provenance associated with this ring created enormous interest and demand. Sotheby's estimate was actually 20 to 30,000 pounds, and it actually fetched 152,450 pounds, around 288,000 Australian dollars in today's money. At the auction, it was purchased by Kelly Clarkson, an American singer who set her heart on acquiring this unique and historical jewel. The problem was, though, that the British government put a holding order on the ring after the sale, which prevented it from leaving the country. A few months were given for a British to raise the funds to purchase it back from Miss Clarkson, which she kindly suggested and agreed to. Chawton Cottage, the home of Jane Austen for the last 8 years of her life, came forward to raise the necessary money. An anonymous benefactor provided most of the funds required within a short space of time, and a rallying call to many, including Susanna here in Australia, and Maggie Sullivan, your counterpart in the United States, as well as British and international Janeites, raised enough money for it to be repurchased, and today it lives in Chawton Cottage. As I said, it's a very simple ring, an oval turquoise cut in the cabochon style, meaning no facets, just a smooth domed surface surrounded by a simple gold setting on a simple gold band. In the picture, we can also see a simple later addition of a ring clip. This literally can be put onto the ring very simply without soldering, and it will reduce the size of the ring by up to 1.5 finger sizes. From my point of view, I often supply these to clients whose fingers go up and down, particularly in the summer, and it stabilizes the ring on the finger. With a ring as fine as this, to resize it might create many problems, with the heat burning the turquoise or fracturing the fine metal. So to have it put a ring clip onto the band in order to reduce the size was by far the best way to go. Turquoise was often used in jewellery at this time, with most fine turquoise coming from Egypt and Persia, or Iran as it is now known, and being one of the sources of fine turquoise today. In the case of Jane's ring, though, it is thought that the turquoise might have come from Cornwall, where small deposits have been found over the last few centuries. And here is inside a turquoise mine in Cornwall. The things I've learned in this talk is quite amazing. The gold too is thought to have been local, as gold has also been found in this area, as well as Wales. In fact, the famous Clogau St David's mine is the source of gold used in the wedding bands belonging to the Queen, the Duchess of Cambridge, and various other senior members of the royal family. Turquoise occurs regularly in Georgian and Regency jewels, and it is here that I would like to introduce this wonderful Georgian graduating shell cameo turquoise and gold necklace made around 1800. The gold work is known as canatile work, which is a type of metal decoration in the form of thin wires making a coarse filigree type pattern. This particular necklace uses 18 karat gold and features a range of graduating cameos surmounted by the gold work, decorated with Persian turquoise. It is a very typical form of decoration found around this time, Turquoises, like many stones, have meaning. And in this case, it represents wisdom, tranquility, protection, good fortune, and hope. Maybe I should have worn some before I bought my ticket for Powerball the other night. You can quite see why stones like this were used regularly in jewellery, as a way of offering protection and good fortune, and given with much thought. The cameos in this piece would be Italian and are tortoiseshell cameos, representing the story of the birth of and life of Cupid, while the clasp also features a cameo, appropriately depicting a pair of hands clasped in friendship. These earrings, those stretching the Georgian period, were made around 1830 to 1840 and feature bright blue turquoise that looks so rich against the high carat looking gold. So here you can definitely see the delicate cantil work. And often when you see pieces of jewellery like this or in a museum, you can't see the reverse. Fortunately, I have a picture of the reverse. And we can see how simply the construction is. And although they are an impressive pair of drop earrings, they're quite light and only weigh just less than 6 grams. They measure some 2.5 inches long. This is a trilogy ring and was made around 1800 and features 3 oval turquoises, the turquoise one having discoloured over the years since it was made. And these images really highlight the simple yet decorative nature of cantil work. The second piece of jewellery associated with Jane is a blue glass bead and ivory bead bracelet decked with glass. Here again, the source of this bracelet before belonging to Jane is unknown. However, it has been vetted by the V&A, who believe it dates to around 1810, 1815. The telltale hint to its age, as far as they are concerned, is the clasp. It is a curved rectangular panel featuring a floral border of flowers with another floral almost emblem to the centre. This form of decoration was typical for the period 1810 to 1815. During this talk, I will mention Georgian paste quite a few times. Essentially, paste is glass, and a material used over centuries to imitate gemstones. Georgian paste of glass, or glass, is highly reflective, as it has been hand cut and then hand polished with a metal powder until it gleams brilliantly. The beads in this bracelet would have been made in this way, while ivory too was used regularly, and this beautiful carved brooch is from around 1825. The third and final piece of jewellery known to have been Jane's is the Topaz cross on the left of this image. Mounted in yellow gold, her younger brother Charles, who was serving in the Royal Navy at the time, gave it to her in May 1801. Captain Austen had been rewarded financially for being involved in the capture of an enemy privateer, and he decided to give his 2 sisters, Jane and Cassandra, a topaz cross each. As you can see, they are quite different in design, though again quite simple. Jane's is a crux quadrata style or Greek cross design, set with 5 oval topazes, and Cassandra's cross is in the Latin cross style. I actually don't feel Jane's had any religious significance in being in the Greek style, as this shape of cross and even Maltese style crosses were very popular styles at this time, as we shall see. Cassandra's one features 4 shaped, almost baguette-cut topaz, with a square-cut stone in the centre. Again, they are both mounted in very simple gold settings, almost what's termed as a bezel setting today. But this setting actually sits on the side of the stone. It doesn't go over the edge of the stone. There are some very fine little claws that go over the edge of the stone and hold the stone in place. The gold beads on each point at this time, the gold beads at each point are just for decoration. Crosses were very popular at at this time as an adornment. Oh, actually, yes, that's right. And here we see a superb example, exactly the same type of setting and what is known and what is using imperial topaz, being a rich sherry-coloured variety. This gives you a better understanding of the setting that Jane and Cassandra's crosses were, as the detail in this image is much clearer. The settings are again open-backed, so the colour of the stones is almost as close to what they actually are, and slightly enhanced by the rose gold-coloured metal on the sides. To understand how fine the settings are to these and many other pieces set in this way, this side view of a coral stick pin illustrates it perfectly. It's the claws that are holding the stone in place. It's not the setting that is attached to the claws. I say open-back settings as another typical way of making pieces to look like this was to make foiled-backed pieces or settings. Often with Georgian and indeed early Victorian jewellery, stones are known as what's known as foiled back. Basically, a setting is made either in gold or silver, and it completely covers the back of the stone or paste. This then causes a problem with the light, and the look of the stones becomes dull. To compensate, behind the stone, a fine piece of silver foil is placed in between the stone and the setting. This then acts almost like a mirror and helps push the brightness of the stone back out through the front of the stone. When coloured stones were used, the same process was used, except the foil would be of a similar colour to the stone. This was done not only to push the colour back through the front of the stone, but in many cases the coloured stones used didn't necessarily have much colour in the first place, so the coloured foil improved the look and colour of the stone. By putting a piece of coloured foil behind the stone, it would not only improve the colour and the beauty of the stones being used. This brooch, or pendant actually, shows first on the right hand side, it shows you how the back of the settings is completely filled in. On the front of the settings, so these are pastes, they're not gemstones. So all of the settings would have foil within the back of on the back of the stone, but within the inside of the setting. And in the case of the green and red stones, there would be red and green foil. And in the case of the white pastes, there would be just the silvery look. And that's what gives life to the look of these stones. A good example of this type of work around this time is where pink topaz is the coloured stone featured. As you can see from this stone, pink topaz is actually quite pale. In this foiled back parure in pink topaz, the topaz are probably pale and have been enhanced by being in closed back settings that have then been colour foiled in between the setting and the back of the stone. This piece, a lovely amethyst riviere, illustrates the point perfectly. This necklet, as I say, is known as a riviere necklace and shows the type of setting perfectly. Gold enclosed backs set with probably Russian amethysts at the front and foiled behind the stones. I would suggest in this case, though, silver foil. And the reason for that is that Russian amethysts are generally of extremely good colour, and you didn't need to enhance the colour of these stones, but what you needed to do was to make sure they looked their best within the gold settings. So by putting silver foil in there, it helps push out the wonderful purple that you see in these stones. This way of enhancing the colour of gems wasn't just with stones. It also occurred in paste jewellery too. And these examples here illustrate the point perfectly. All these pieces are paste and from the Georgian era. Crosses in whichever style were often hung from similar single row necklaces known as riviere necklaces, either in real stones or paste, but mainly in close-back settings. And these foiled or open-back set Riviere necklets were almost de rigueur at the time, being both wearable and popular by the upper, or at least wealthy classes. Sometimes they would have a pendant on them, other times they were just worn as a necklace. This is a paste one imitating amethyst. The word Riviere comes from the French for river, and the reason they're called Riviere necklaces is because it's like this flowing single line of stones. And of course, as we have seen, Georgian jewelry features diamonds as well. And here we have an exceptional Maltese cross brooch, all diamond set in gold and silver and made around 1820. Despite the size of the image here, this brooch is just under 2 inches square and weighs 22.5 grams. But if you look at it very closely, other than the pin at the back, which is in yellow gold, the whole front is set in silver, and the silver is quite dark in colour, and that's because over the years it has oxidised, so it's lost that silvery look and become much darker. Again, it's really nice if one can actually find an image of the piece on the reverse. And in this particular case, this shows you the back. So the back of the setting is in all yellow gold. The reason they often, certainly if you had money, you would always have yellow gold at the back. Because as some of you might experience, even with a modern piece of silver jewellery, sometimes silver jewellery can leave a dark mark on your skin. That never occurs, or rarely occurs, with gold. So often pieces were backed in yellow gold, so that you didn't end up having some sort of dark mark, which would have occurred in silver. The other interesting thing about this piece is that at the top, you can see there is a hinged ring. And it is that hinged ring that is connected to a Riviera necklet to be able to make it worn as a pendant on a Riviera or any type of necklace. We can't, of course, forget the men of this world, and possibly the best example of Georgian paste jewels that they wore throughout, and particularly towards the end of the 18th century, were shoe buckles. All of these are mounted in gold and silver, while other versions made at the time would also be made using diamonds. They were quite the rage, and even written about in literature at the time. Dramatist Richard Sheraton's Lord Foppington complained to his jeweller, saying, "My good sir, you forget that these matters are not as they used to be. Formerly, indeed, the buckle was a sort of machine intended to keep on the shoe. But now the case is quite reversed, and the shoe is of no earthly use but to keep on the buckle." So these are beautiful shoe buckles, and in fact here we see one being worn. I think this is actually Louis XIV and his shoe buckle. And then of course there were belt buckles, and this truly fabulous belt buckle, however, was made for a lady with matching ring around 1820 and completely encrusted in turquoise beads. The serpent's head is set with diamonds, as is the centre of the ring. While other items included gentlemen's dress buttons, these being silver and gold mounted and set with white paste. These were made around 1830. And seed pearl pieces were also popular, as seen in this beautiful natural seed pearl necklace and amethyst seed pearl brooch. This was made around 1810, and the pearls are likely to have come from the coast of India, where they were sourced in those days before pollution were paid to those areas as pearl sourcing areas. The finest Georgian agate jewellery uses faceted or cabochon stones cut into fine translucent slivers to allow the light to shine through and reveal the patterns of the stones. This butterfly brooch and matching earrings made of moss agate are probably some of the finest surviving examples of such pieces, set in fine gold settings and made around 1820. Most of these types of moss agate jewels were made in Scotland, one of the largest sources of moss agate. Then there are micro-mosaic jewels. In this case, a fabulous necklace and drop earrings mounted in gold in a type of stripe design. Most pieces that one sees like this were made later in the 19th century, but this particular one was made around 1810. Literally a mosaic of hard stone fragments arranged to represent, in this case, birds with Roman artifacts framed in red glass and mounted in gold. And continuing the agate story, these Georgian rings from the 18th century are actually inspired by agate. They have ivory backgrounds that are then painted with flowers, as is in the case of the ring on the left with a garnet surround, and the centre with a diamond surround, while the one on the right is decorated with hair to make it look like agate, and again a diamond surround. Clear rock crystal acts as a glass cover to each. It is this hair that brings us to mourning jewellery from the late 18th, early 19th century. All these pieces are mourning jewels, rings in the top line and brooches in the bottom line, decorated beautifully in black enamel, and in most cases centering with some plaited hair. The hair was generally from the person or child who had died, and was a very personal memento within the jewel. This too is a mourning ring from the late 18th century. This is beautiful. It uses blue guilloche enamel and an all-diamond set urn and surround. These types of mourning pieces generally memorialise someone of significance or importance, though surprisingly in this case it is not known who it is. Sometimes one comes across amusing mourning jewellery, even though the subject of death is generally regarded as being serious. Hidden meanings can often be realised in the image. I love this ring depicting a woman with a wine glass, mounted in gold with a diamond border, and comes from the late 18th century. What message do you think it's trying to say? Good riddance, perhaps, or she was remembered as a drunk. Pets, too, were sometimes immortalised, and this pendant is probably from the early 19th century, and the death of two loved ones. Or possibly it was another hidden meaning by showing a dog, which is the symbol of fidelity. Getting back to our author, though, I think because of her background, when we see drama series such as Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice, the producers are generally sensitive to the period and her simple background and taste. Her main characters in Pride and Prejudice, for example, are barely adorned in a single jewel. The same can be said of the 1995 version of Sense and Sensibility. Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet do wear a little jewellery at times, but it is nothing as grand as some of the pieces I've been showing you today. So it's like the difference in class and wealth is definitely observed when it comes to jewels. My favourite character in the BBC's 1995 version of Pride and Prejudice is Lady Catherine de Bourgh, played by Barbara Lee Hunt. Wow, she was fantastic. She was most pleased with Miss Bennet's attitude and demeanour on numerous occasions, and who was horrified at the prospect of her marrying Mr. Darcy. Here is a lady who obviously has plenty of money, and yet she barely wears any jewels to promote them. This image shows her wearing a chain and brooch, and though not these, there is no reason to think they couldn't have been something like this lovely Georgian pinchbeck chain. Pinchbeck was first discovered or made in the 18th century by Christopher Pinchbeck, a London clockmaker. It is a mix of copper and zinc and took on a yellow-gold colour over time. The clasp in this particular necklace is set with purple and glass beads. The brooch too is very understated, and I suspect was either black onyx or dark cabochon garnet as the centre stone, surrounded by pearls all white. Again, something very much like this Georgian carbuncle and garnet oval brooch, so typical of the period, except surrounded by white pastes instead of garnets as we see here. And this leads me to who does wear these sorts of jewels these days? Well, of course, drama series and films often use original pieces, especially if trying to be as accurate as they possibly can be to the period in which they are set. Most recently, the most accurate TV series portraying the correct jewels and items from the time is Downton Abbey. All these are original, the Dowager Countess tiara being Victorian, while Lady Mary's tiara and necklaces are all Edwardian. The series, set in the early 20th century, used jewels lent by Bentley and Skinner, the Piccadilly-based jewellery store in London. Indeed, if you visit Bentley and Skinner's website, you will find a trove of jewels stretching across the centuries and some of the finest examples available today, other than, of course, this wonderful amethyst and canatille brooch is part of their current Georgian jewels collection, as indeed is this magnificent aquamarine and canatille suite made around 1920. I wonder if anyone here has seen Bridgerton. The latest Netflix series set in the same period, on the other hand, mainly gets it wrong when it comes to the jewels worn. For example, here we see the Featherstone ladies in faux or costume jewels that frankly could have been made in China yesterday. There is one necklace, though faux, I'm sure is correct to the period that Lady Featherstone wears, and it is this one, imitating peridots and diamonds. As for the dress pattern, I'm not too impressed with Netflix interpretations of Regency. Royalty too, of course, are the other wearers of such jewels, and most European royal families have many in their collections. While researching this talk, I came across this wonderful pink topaz and diamond necklace currently owned by the Queen of Sweden. This beautiful necklace can be dated back to having been made in 1804 in Russia. It is now part of the Swedish crown jewels and known and is part of the Russian pink topaz suite. As we can see here, being worn by Queen Sylvia of Sweden. The whole suite comprises the magnificent necklace, the elegant and long drop earrings, and a brooch with detachable drop. And there is also a second brooch, though Her Majesty is not wearing it on this occasion. It is made in yellow, gold and silver, and set with open back settings. So these topaz are the real McCoy and the best colour. Topaz jewellery in the Regency and Georgian times was often quite extravagant. And here, in a wonderful demi-lune parure being sold by a colleague of mine in New York, we see how beautifully matched these gorgeous imperial topazes are. A demi-parure means 2 or 3 matching items, whereas a parure can mean up to 7 or 8 matching items, including rings and necklaces. This set was made around 1770 and features old cut diamonds in silver cut down settings that have oxidized over the years, while the topaz are all set in yellow gold to enhance the beautiful yellow. What is particularly fine about the topazes, though, is their colour. Hence, they too are in open back settings. Of course, what a lot of people like to hear in my talks is who wears these pieces today. Well, I have to say not a lot, but there is one proponent of the Georgian Riviera necklaces who I have to talk about. I'm not sure if anybody, and she is editor-in-chief of Vogue. Dame Anna Wintour, DVE. Most people think of her black sunglasses are her signature, but to a jeweller like me, it's her jewels, and specifically her Georgian Riviera necklaces. I am unsure as to how many she has, but undoubtedly it would be the biggest collection owned by one woman anywhere in the world. She rarely wears a single one, it's always 2. Sitting and chatting with the Queen at London Fashion Week in 2018, she wore 3. and those sunglasses. And sometimes she goes completely over the top and will wear 5. In fact, I've seen her in a live interview wearing at least 6. Only she can pull this off, and she doesn't seem to mind mixing the colours, which often pick up the colours in her clothes. So who are we to question her? I, for one, totally applaud it. I am unsure of how many she owns, but definitely they are Georgian, and she would only wear pieces that are right to her. To her, it doesn't matter that the colours don't match. It's about the look and the style. The final piece to end this talk is surely the most famous and genuine of Regency jewels, still in current use, and that is the diamond diadem. It was made in 1820 by Rundle, Bridge and Rundle, royal goldsmiths responsible for many of the jewels created for George IV, William IV and Queen Victoria. When one considers the character of George IV, so aptly described by the Duke of Wellington after his death, I think you can begin to realise what a king and man he was, and I quote, "George IV was the most extraordinary compound of talent, wit, buffoonery, obstinacy and good feeling. In short, a medley of the most opposite qualities, with a great preponderance of good that I ever saw in any character in my whole life." George IV loved to show off. He wore the diamond diadem, believe it or not, on this, his coronation day, on his way to the coronation. And though obviously no photographs exist, this watercolour, after Seal Wilde, gives you an idea as to how he wore it. So even though this piece was commissioned for his great day and was typical of his extravagant ways, he was such a large and overbearing individual who loved to show off and dress up. You could just see part of it there on his Spanish hat, which together with ostrich plumes rather obscure the effect. It was made for the princely sum of £8,216. This included an £800 charge for the hire of the diamonds, a regular occurrence for coronations up to 1837. The diadem is unique in that it features roses, thistles and shamrocks, as well, of course, heavily diamond-set crosses. The centrepiece of one of the crosses, and the one that is to be worn at the front, contains a large yellow diamond that is being set in yellow gold. The reason it's being set in yellow gold is the white of the silver settings and the white of the diamonds would make the yellow diamond much paler if it wasn't enhanced by yellow gold. And indeed, you often see jewellery today where it's white gold and then the colour of the diamond is enhanced by putting yellow gold around it. This piece contains 1,333 diamonds of varying cuts, centering on the yellow diamond, and it is supported by a double row of natural pearls and stands some 7 centimetres tall. It is an extremely potent political symbol and has been worn by all British queens, regnant and consorts since Queen Adelaide. Our current Queen, Elizabeth II, first wore it to the first state opening of Parliament of her reign in November 1952, and on the journey to her coronation in June 1953. And she continues to wear it to most state opening of parliaments today. Returning, though, to Jane Austen, though I think her jewels are entirely typical of the era, her class and her reluctance to wear big showy pieces, it indicated her integrity to who she really was. Thank you.
Wasn't that worth coming out today for? I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions for Adrian, but I thought I'd just get in the first, Adrian. When Jane Austen travelled around England and was in smaller towns, places like maybe Canterbury or Winchester, what would there have been in the way of jewellery shops then? I mean, obviously there were plenty in London and I guess Bath, but would most small towns have had a jeweller?
That's a really good question. I would say there would have been a jewellery store. It would be nothing on the scale of what you saw in London, but certainly watches have been invented by then, or pocket watches have been invented by then, and there is always a need for jewellery. Absolutely, always a need for jewellery.
Mine's just increased a lot. That's all.
So I would say there were small little shops, and they would sell small pieces of jewellery and be able to repair jewellery and watches as well. Yeah, good question.
I don't know if you're aware, but the first picture you showed of Jane Austen is actually known as the wedding ring portrait.
Oh.
Because there is a wedding ring on her finger. And of course she never married.
Right.
So somebody in the history of adding to the portraits,
right,
added a wedding ring.
Right. Artistic license.
Artistic license. So, questions?
Sorry, and I'm very happy to answer questions. And at the end of the questions, I had mentioned to Susanna, I'd like to show you a piece that I've done some work on. So we can either do that now, or we can answer questions and then come back to it. It takes about 3 minutes, but it's a fascinating piece.
Maybe do it now, and then people can think of their questions.
Okay. So, the year before last, a client came to see me who I had met about 7 years ago in the Western Districts in Victoria. And she had come to see me. I gave a talk at the Napier Ladies Club, and she came to see me about some jewellery that she had. And in amongst it was this beautiful blue stone and platinum ring with small diamond-set shoulders. And when she showed it to me, I said, "Oh my goodness, what an absolutely beautiful sapphire." And she said, "Oh, sadly, it's not a sapphire." I said, "Really?" And so she said, "Yes, I took it to a Collins Street jeweller, and they told me that it's a piece of glass." And I said, "Well, I have to say that really surprises me because it's platinum, it's set with very well matched diamonds on the shoulders, a series of graduation stones, and I believe the ring is actually French, probably around about 1900, 1910. And I find it very hard to believe that this is being said is a piece of glass. I think it is a very fine sapphire. So if it is a piece of glass, it's not therefore worth a great deal of money. So what I would like to suggest, even though you don't know me, you know that I've given a talk here, so you can. Why don't you let me take it with me? Because I'm going back to Melbourne tonight, and my valuer happens to live around the corner from me, and I know she leaves for work at 7:30 in the morning, and I could get up early and stop her outside her driveway. And she'll say, "What on earth now, Adrian?" And I'll just say, "Here's a ring, could you take it in? I really need you to look at it first thing and tell me if it's glass or what." And that's exactly what she said, and that's exactly what she did. And it turned out to be a very fine cashmere sapphire worth about $75,000. Trust in jewellery is essential. It is the major agreement to any successful business, knowing what you have. And I can assure you, I rarely make mistakes, but if I am hesitant about a piece, I will say, "I'm taking this in as a blue stone because I'm not entirely convinced it's this or that, but I will tell you what it is once it's been checked by a valuer or in a laboratory." It was because of this trust this lady came to see me at the beginning of last year. She opened this little box, had a little note in the top, and she said, "We've just given this to our daughter for her 40th birthday, and as is the case with many ladies today, particularly young ladies, she doesn't like it because she'll never wear a brooch. So what we would like you to do is we'd like you to break it up, and we want you to take the amethyst and the diamonds, and we want you to make a big cocktail ring for her because she loves the idea of a big ring." And I said, "Well, you should know by now that I am a purist, and I will not do that for you. You can take it anywhere else, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who'd be more than happy to break it up, but I would never break a piece like this up. You know how I am." And so she said, "Yes, we know how you are, but we also trust you. Well, come on, you've got to think of something. What can you do with it?" So I go, "Oh my goodness." So I said, "Look, the only suggestion I could make is that maybe I could lift the claws very carefully to the amethyst and take the amethyst out, and we could make that into a ring, but I will not take the rest of the brooch apart because it was made around 1900, 1910, retailed by a fabulous firm called Collingwoods, who were jewellers to the Royal Court at the time. And if you took the diamonds out of this silver setting, the setting would actually break and become damaged. So she said, I love the idea of you taking the stone out. Yes, my daughter would be happy about that. So then I kept on thinking, and I said, oh, actually there's another thing we could do. And she said, what's that? I said, the only thing I would be prepared to do is to take the pin and the catch off the back. But what I could do is to make a gold frame that sits around it, and we have claws on the corners, and we glue the brooch without the pin within this gold frame, which is on a gold band, and then we put the claws down, so that if, say, in 20 years' time, she said, I wish I'd kept this as a brooch, you could actually lift those claws, warm up the glue, take it out, and you could easily weld the pin and the catch back on. And I don't feel that is wrong. I think that is a way of overcoming. Oh, fantastic idea. I should also say, having talked to you about the value of provenance today, this is the interesting note that was in the box. So what it is addressed for Mrs. Consett with every good wish for a happy Christmas from Maud, 1917. This was actually a gift given by Queen Maud of Norway to her equerry's wife, who her equerry was the great-grandfather of this girl who I am proposing to make a cocktail with. That piece of paper would probably triple the value of the brooch because it gives it provenance and history. So that when I saw that, this is even more of a reason why you can't break this up. So we came to an arrangement, we would make a frame, and I would give a quote. So what then happens is I create a CAD design. So this shows you how I'm going to make a frame in all yellow gold, and this frame is going to sit very neatly around the sides of the brooch. And in this image here, you can see these claws. And once this frame is actually made, those claws will be carefully put over the corners of the brooch. So even though it's glued, we do know glue sometimes doesn't work, the claws will hold it in place and it will never lose. But fundamentally, we never altered the piece other than changing it from a brooch to a ring, and it didn't change the nature or look of the piece, and it can be put back as a brooch. So I emailed these designs and I emailed a quote. You'll notice that we've actually said 9 karat gold. I'm not one to spend people's money irresponsibly. I don't believe that this ring needed to be made in 18 karat gold. So I gave her a quote, which was $1,850 for the design and to make it in 9 karat yellow gold, which I think is absolutely fine for this ring. We then, they agreed, everybody agrees with my quote. And we then made the casting from the CAD design. This lady lives in Wagga, I live in Melbourne. We sent this up to her. I needed her to try it on to make sure it fitted, because you don't want to have to size it once you put the brooch in it. And it fitted, she's very excited, sent this ring back down to me, and then we clean up this casting, and then take the pin and the catch off the brooch, which is in the box with the label, so everything is intact. And that is the end result. And here is it on a finger. And that is, I think, an absolutely fabulous cocktail ring. And she is so over the moon about it. It's probably the biggest cocktail ring you'll see in Australia. But she absolutely loves it, and I feel happy that we have kept the integrity of the piece. So the message is, I visit Sydney regularly. You've got my catalogue, you've seen some of my jewels. If you would like to see me about anything, I don't charge for an appointment because jewellery is my passion. But if you happen to be coming to Melbourne, phone me up or email me and say we'd like to see you on such and such day, and you will be invited at 5 o'clock. Gin and tonics and jewellery just goes so well. So it will be very nice to see you. All right? Thank you.
How can we resist Jill and Tyke jewellery?